itself. Well, it prepares itself. And we are ready for our meeting to begin.
I'd like to call the meeting to order. This is a public hearing for the e-learning plan and for the fiscal 2021 budget on September 18th, 2020 at 7 p.m. Thank you for joining us, everyone. I would like to start with the e-learning plan presentation, please.
Sure. Would you like to start with the pledge and roll call before that? Or
Oh,
it's not on the list,
It's
but
not on the list.
it's on the regular
but
meeting.
We need to roll call
We do.
by a legal thing. So let's start with the pledge. So I'll rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Okay, give me just a second and I will share my screen appropriately for a flag. I will try to share my screen. Sorry, give me just a moment.
That's okay, we're just standing at attention.
Standing at attention for no apparent reason.
That's okay.
Oh my goodness, I had this pulled up.
Hang on. Got it.
There we go. And let me share this.
I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please, Monica. Here. Mr. Coleman,
Here.
Mr. Gray,
Here.
Mr. Guzman,
Here.
Ms. Allen,
Here.
Mr. Murphy,
Here.
Ms. Lee.
Here.
Okay. Now we'll hear the e-learning presentation.
Okay, so the e-learning was presented at the last board meeting and we talked about it. Does anyone have any more questions about that? Concerns? What we are doing is following the state guidelines, and this particular approval will make it official so that if we call an emergency day within the next 3 school years, we can choose to do an e-learning day versus having to make up that day at the end of the school year for a snow day, for example. We could still choose to do just a snow day. I know Gurney 56, 2 years ago, before all of this remote learning climate, they had a mix. So some days they would call as an e-learning day and some days they would just do a snow day to make up at the end of the year, depending on what their calendar was like. So, and to give the kids that experience of a snow day with no strings attached. So this means that if we have an e-learning plan in place, we can, in lieu of an emergency day that needs to be made up at the end of the year, we can take this and do an e-learning plan and go from there. And it counts as school. So it's 5 clock hours of instruction. It's just like our remote learning plan is. And along with accessibility, we have to have accessibility. We have to meet special education guidelines. It is basically what the remote learning plan is based on, but this is an official e-learning plan because this is what's in the state statute, and we have to go through the hearing process to do this. Versus the remote learning plan, which is only valid when there's a state of emergency or the governor has a pandemic plan in place, as he does with the 5 phases. And so that's a whole different situation. Plans are the same, but this is a technicality that involves a specific hearing and specific board approval, specific steps. in place. So we already have that done because of our current situation. So let's take advantage and get it officially approved by the ROE.
So it's just giving us options.
Yep, it just gives us more options
Okay.
in the future.
Does anybody have questions for Dr. Lynn on this? Okay. Thank you. Resident presenters, are you here? There's no one here. Okay. Then on to the budget presentation. Dr. Johns.
Okay, all I really have tonight is just a spreadsheet that shows the differences from the original budget that we put on public display and the document that's before you now. We did have some revenue reductions as well as increases. And the same thing with expenditures. We had some areas where we increased expenditures, other areas where I decreased expenditures. The major pieces in capital projects, I added the phone system and the HVAC there that I think I put in my report. So that's why the new one is the difference is 135,000. The same thing. No, actually, I took some things away. In life safety, life safety is where we added the phone system. And then in capital projects, originally I just put in there the amount we had spent the prior year. So then I actually fine-tuned it to be projects that we are looking at for this year. The tort fund, there was an increase because we were able to put more of our liability and workers' comp insurance into there. And so that's a fund that we want to make sure that we spend because otherwise it can become a source for taxpayers to challenge us. And transportation I added because once I started calculating some of the costs and providing meals as well as some of the other trips that now that we're in school, I'm seeing that we're starting to do, I needed more money in there for salaries and expenses. So overall, in each fund, it's not a huge amount, but I just felt better going through and trying to arrange everything and make sure I had things as close to the right place as I could, but also knowing that with the pandemic, it could all change tomorrow. Does anybody have any specific questions? I know this is a lot to take in.
So the second is titled revenue.
Oh, and that should be expenditure. I apologize. I copied it. Actually.
Okay.
Yeah, and I meant to change that.
So
And then at the bottom, you can see what happened as far as changes. And this is still the difference between the original beginning and ending balance and the actual.
So Dr. Johns, this is the total change right here on the bottom. Okay.
For all funds. And the same thing on the other two, the revenue and expenses. So we had a actual reduction of revenue of about 97,000, and then overall for all the funds, I increased the expenditures to 439,000. For 439,776.
Wait, wouldn't this be bigger then?
No, because the fact that
If you decrease revenue and increase expenses, wouldn't this be a 500,000?
that sounds reasonable, but I can't tell you exactly what it's not.
It might be just a formula.
Yeah, I'm sure. It may be that instead of subtracting the new one from the old one, on one of them I flipped it.
Right.
So is it just that blank that's wrong, or?
It's probably one of the individual funds,
Okay,
but yeah.
could you help us understand overall where we are? If this is the difference.
Yep.
overall, the other thing that this year the state did is we had to include our activity funds in here, which for us isn't a huge amount, but so we,
Why did they have us include our activity funds?
part of there's another packet I have with all the changes. But it's just something that they're trying to combine so that all the funds that the district has are shown on the budget form. And by 2023, then the whole evidence-based funding piece is also going to become a part of the budget as well. So over the next 2 or 3 years, we're going to see changes every year in how the budget works. So with the education fund, the starting balance.
I'm sorry, just one more question. on
Sure.
what You just said, forgive me. But the evidence-based funding model doesn't fund for extracurriculars, does it?
No, that's a totally separate piece
Why do they want us to report it?
because they want us to be transparent and for the public to be able to see all of our revenues and expenditures in one place.
Oh, that makes sense.
It's an added transparency that,
Oh, that's good. Okay.
yeah,
So
it's a
in
good,
the
It's a good
education
thing.
fund, we're
in
beginning
theory.
the year with approximately 5.8 million. And we're going to end the year with about 5.65 million. For O&M, we're starting with 428,265 and ending with 341,366.34. So that's a loss of less than 100,000, but it is lower. For debt service, we're starting at 4,140,000, going down to 2.4 million. And that's primarily just because of the fact that I typically include the July payment in the cash budget because we pay that in June. And so that's the next piece, and we haven't gotten the additional revenue for that yet. Transportation, starting with about 1.4 million, ending up with about 1 million. So that's eating up about 400,000. And part of that additional amount that is in there, I plugged some additional dollars in so that we didn't have to come back if there was a change. So hopefully we'll spend less, but we don't really know. IMRF starting with 654 and ending with 242. And that's also another one that we want to try and keep that balance low so that there's not a taxpayer challenge. Capital projects. Oh, I said that one. IMRF is starting with 272, 282, ending with 242, 234. Capital projects is starting with 551,530 and ending with 225,445. Working cash is starting with 573,063, ending at 642,202. Short beginning at 280,203 and ending at 275,412. And fire prevention and safety starting at 108,241 and ending at 82,547. So like we said before, capital projects and life safety are ones that we typically don't worry about the fact that we're spending more than we're taking in, because oftentimes we have to collect money for a few years before we have money to spend. We have enough to do a larger project. And like for the fire prevention and safety, that was for the phone system that we had to wait an extra year before we had enough money.
And Dr. Jones, what was it, can you repeat the ed fund, please?
Sure. The ed fund was beginning balance of 5.8 million and ending at 5.645.
The startings of the top line, no wait. I can move down to, if you've got that, I can move down to the ending.
Okay.
This line is the ending, yeah. Can you read transportation? I think you're reading the wrong line.
I put it in.
Yeah. I don't know why. There's,
828,386 is the starting balance,
uh-huh,
and the ending balance is, oh yeah, it is, 999,168.
thanks. Because you had us losing
I was reading
400.
I was reading the total of the receipts and revenue.
Right, right.
So overall, if we can maintain this, considering what we've been through and what we're extending, the other piece that I added in was the Lake County CARES Act dollars, which I plugged in. I don't really know where we'll end up. The original allocation for schools was 4 million. When I talked to somebody from Lake County today, they said now that the allocation is 5 million for schools. And within the next day or two, they anticipate it will change to 7 million. And it will be up to so based on that, my estimate is we'll get somewhere between 50 and 60,000 if it bumps up to 7 million. But I know a part of the reason that we're getting a smaller chunk than others is because our free and reduced numbers are fairly low compared to other districts. But they've changed the process so that if I give them, I got some forms for Chris to sign tonight. And then if I give them our enrollment, they'll just write us a check. Apparently the federal treasury has decided that we don't have to jump through all the hoops to justify that we spent those dollars. Which I think just recently happened. Because I had reached out to them because I was at the part where I need to fill out those portions. And I wasn't quite sure what to put. And he said, you don't have to worry about it now. So
Oh,
that's a
okay.
good thing.
You can fill it in on the back end.
No, we don't have to fill anything. They're assuming that this getting started up with remote learning and all the things that we're doing to get ready for the new era, that we will have spent those dollars. And we definitely have.
That's
As of August, we had spent about, I think, 244,000.
that's a great relief to not have to, yeah, I think, and it's appropriate in an emergency time like this.
And if anybody ever does need us to justify, we'll have no problem showing them, because I actually have coded some of our line items as COVID related. So when we're making orders, then we're automatically charging to that line that's identified as COVID. So it'll make it much easier if somebody comes back with questions.
Good.
To be able to show them exactly what we purchased.
Yeah, well, it's not gonna be hard.
No.
So that 5.6 million, that's the estimated fund balance at the end of, projected fund balance at the end of.
For the education
Yeah,
fund,
the
yeah,
education
which is our
the end of
largest
the
fund.
year.
And this is on a cash basis.
So is Dr. John's line 3 is the estimated beginning funding balance or ending of last year's, beginning of this year. So if we look at line 3 and for the board to simplify, and then look at which one, 118 or I was 118? That gives us our overall ending balance this year. That would tell us what we anticipate our activities resulting in this year, right?
Right.
Overall.
Okay.
Now, one thing to consider is, as you were saying, and I just want to review this, funds like tort fund are funds that we build up over years, and this year, if we spend that money down, it's going to look like we.
Yeah. Not tort, but it's capital projects, life safety.
Oh, life safety. I'm sorry,
life
life safety. Life safety is what I was thinking. Capital projects and life safety. So those are funds that we build up over years, save up for, and when we have a project, then we use that money. So it's going to look like we're taking a loss in those two areas. So generally, we take out those two areas when we calculate the state budget, right?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, those aren't a part of the calculation the state does, are normally the ones that I do when I'm looking to see if our budget's balanced.
So when we look at the budget balance page from the state, which is way down here.
I should give you the Excel one.
I'll find it. So this is what is important to us too, is that says for the state's purposes, This is a balanced budget, no deficit reduction plan is required. It may not end up that way. And I want to point that out. We will likely come back and amend the budget one way or the other based on the constantly changing needs that we have that we can't anticipate at the beginning of the year. I know Steve and I are getting requests for, hey, we need this, we need this, we need to support this group of students, or we need a new app that is going to make our lives better. And all of that starts to add up pretty quickly. So we're doing our best to anticipate that, and Steve's been trying to keep ahead of that. But I just want to point out down the road that I understand that it's scrambling. But I also want to say that this is currently a balanced budget in these particular funds, and this is what the state looks at. This is the bulk of our funds that determine our operations. So we have the education fund, which is the largest. We will spend almost 14 million out of the ed fund. O&M, we spend about 1.5 million, and transportation about 1.2. Those are what we anticipate spending this year for a total of 16.6. Now that's not everything, but those are the main funds that we look at as how are we operating, and that's what the state looks at to say, are we spending more than we're taking in, etc. Are there any questions about that? And I'm happy to, and Steve's happy, Dr. Johns is happy too, to answer anything else.
What I would like to do is just take a look at the difference between the publicly posted budget and what we currently have, that spreadsheet that's put together. I just want to feel and nail down what conflict is there between the two.
Right.
Because you're right, the calculations.
Yeah, I've had to.
Something's
I
wonky.
had to flip something the other way. And I think I was working on that right in the middle of when we had the power outage too. So I'm sure that something in that middle of the class.
That would, if it's negative, that would mean that, Dr. Johns, if it's a negative number on expenses, that means that just a decrease from what you had originally posted
Right.
in that
It's
category.
negative.
Yeah, this is a different spreadsheet.
So. Oh, you know what I think?
It's around 2 or 5.
Total difference.
Well, the ending balance on the public display one was 5,883,82. $234,532. That is correct. So it's saying that there was a decrease in the ed fund of 234,532. O&M that looks good at. Okay, transportation, that should be a positive instead of a negative. So instead of 263,219, it should be a positive 263,219 instead of a negative.
Okay.
So I think that would make it,
And then if you take a look at capital projects, you're at 6,500. The bottom calculation makes it look like you're calculating 65,000. Right? You're like 129 something in the balance of income. In the capital projects.
but at 191,708, that would be correct because we started, I added more projects in there. So we started, no, wait, we ended with 225 and the public display went only had 33,000. There was an increase of 191,000.
We should simply be able to take the difference in total change revenue and total change expenditures, right?
Yeah, and that's going to be more for us
Easier.
probably than the ended at the bottom.
So capital projects at the bottom, then in balance should be like 128.7 approximately.
Well, no,
So it's correct?
well, that's based on, well, it should be both, yeah. It should be,
Yep, so that's up by about 60. That's IMRF is correct. Transportation should be about 257. Debt service should be 24,999. If we can follow that along, and ed fund would be
yeah,
different
hold up.
Ed fund would be different.
too.
Okay.
Ed fund should be 173,000. Yeah.
But we're confident that the current full budget is.
Right.
So theoretically, since we know what the beginning fund balances are going to be, and ending fund balances are, and we've looked at those, and we've discussed the differences, we could probably move on and then supply this later
I can do that.
to anyone who would like to see it. That would be great.
I can update
Does anybody
this
have
and-
any- Does anybody have any issue with that at all? Excellent. So that's what we'll do. We'll just, because the budget looks good. It's just, this was just
I
a
was
little
just trying to
sheet.
summarize to show you what had changed.
Something's goofy
In
in there.
doing that, I'm hand typing those items in as opposed to copy and paste them.
And probably a formula sometimes can get, everybody totally gets that with Excel.
I did catch myself sometimes too, I was subtracting the wrong one.
Well, when you're trying to do a difference rather than it's easy to get inverted. So the budget is the budget and the budget's good. I want to tell you, I don't envy you trying to project this budget into this year. I'm grateful to you for all of the extra time you're having to spend trying to work in the latest projections.
This is on one case, everybody else is spending more time as well, so. You know, when we look at teachers in the classroom, look at the administrators, and everybody, you know, the bus drivers are having to disinfect the buses, you know, everybody has an additional role that we never had before, so. This is just a small part of it.
Yeah, at the same time, you're used to working with, like, the budget is done, And then we have to revisit toward the end of the year. This is gonna be a budget in progress, just to, warn everyone. The good news is we're in a healthy financial position now. And it looks like even with an emergency year with a lot of extra costs, we'll be in a healthy position at the end of the year. And that's a wonderful place to be.
It's very nice not to have to worry about how I'm gonna make payroll.
Yes. Yeah, we don't have
And
to worry
that's-
about,
That's where we were when I started.
yeah, right.
And tax anticipation warrants and all that. So we will have we have a healthy fund balance now. We will have a healthy one when we're done, and thank God for that. So,
Right. This is our best guess at what we anticipate, of course, but that's again changing. The other important thing that I want to point out to the school board is the governor has come out and said 5 to 10% budget cuts, spending cuts across the state for this current year. And we don't know what that means. We don't know if it means K-12, if it means general operations for the state. So we just want to be prepared, and we have been told by, I know Dr. Johns belongs to the school board, or not the school board, business official, Illinois Association of School Business Officials organization, and they've said, be prepared. Don't panic, but what that would mean for us, and let's say that they would cut 5% of the state funding, and our state funding is about 4 million if you total up transportation and the ed fund and special ed and all of our, it's right around the $4 million mark. So 5% of that would be about 200,000 off the top. We have right here currently showing a $200,000 credit in these particular funds this year, where we're exceeding revenue over expenditures today. So we could cover maybe that if everything's perfectly orchestrated, which I doubt will happen based on how this is going, but just wanted to be aware of that. If it's a 10% slash of all of our state funding, I doubt either of those scenarios will happen, but it could. We just want to make you aware of what's being touted out there and what we are being asked to plan for.
So, but so they announced in July or June that there would be no reduction, that we get the
They
same
did.
funding that we got the year before, right?
Right.
So
They
now
announced.
they're talking about, but if they're talking about 5%, they have to put it through the formula. So if they're going to prorate through the formula, we wouldn't be reduced because we're tier 2. That's what the law says.
Right.
So we wouldn't get hit theoretically.
And
But
part of that was
that's-
transportation. and
transportation's a
some of
big
the other
chunk.
state funding. We also get some. So the transportation piece.
That's outside the
well, special
formula.
ed,
That's outside
Because
EBF.
there's
Okay.
separate from PBL.
So they can hit
EBF
us in
is-
transportation.
And that's typically what they do hit us.
Right.
They hit us in transportation and the special ed reimbursements like prorating notes.
But I'm not saying that. I'm just saying hopefully it's not going to happen. And usually they protect K-12 is the last thing to go. So we don't know how that's.
And they've been very good ever since EBF, and even when it was general state aid, of making sure they made those payments on a regular basis, even if they withheld some of the other transportation and special ed.
Right.
separate funding.
And
Right.
they usually eventually catch up.
They usually eventually catch up.
Well,
Would-
I think right now we're at least 2 payments behind, if not 3,
Oh, really? For transportation?
transportation and the special ed.
Yeah.
Because we didn't get all 4 payments last year.
Special ed is outside the formula?
Parts of pieces.
Like for our students that are in residential or not residential, in private placement, that's a separate funding piece.
It's the reimbursements.
Mandated category. Mandated category, okay. Yeah, that's Elizabeth who's telling us, I think,
Thank you, Elizabeth.
or maybe that was not.
So-
I don't know.
So I don't want, right, I don't want to create extra burden or panic, but even having said that, even if it was a straight 5% cut, we could weather
We'll
that
be
storm.
okay.
We'll be okay. So just wanted to point that out.
I don't think they would do that, but.
I
as
hope
far
not.
as, well, not for the EDF, but yeah, transportation. Okay,
But on
That's
a
good to know.
positive note, we are allowed to continue charging our meal deliveries as regular transportation that would be partially reimbursed. Which I was, when I did a webinar last week, I was pleased to learn that.
oh, that's great. Excellent.
And I think that's because so many schools are totally remote. That they're doing the meal deliveries and those kind of things and not doing regular transportation, but we're still doing both.
Mhm. Makes sense. Does anybody have any further questions for Dr. Johns? Here on Zoom? Well, as I said, I think this will be a work in progress. I think we'll probably get, we might, you might want to do, if it starts getting pretty far away from this, we might want to be updated even before.
Yeah, I'm thinking
Usual
maybe
time.
looking at quarterly or something.
You might be looking at an ongoing discussion rather than
That's okay.
twice a year. That would be great. Thanks. Just keep us apprised. Thank you. Request by, okay, so there are no resident presenters. Were there any comments, Denise, about the budget whatsoever?
No, I was just checking the email again and there's not been any comments.
Thank you. Yes. Okay, then there being no further business, I'd like to move that we adjourn the public hearing.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, the meeting is adjourned. Or the hearing is adjourned. The meeting's just starting. So now we're on to the regular meeting. So this is a meeting where we vote on things as opposed to a committee of the whole meeting where we discuss the things that we'll be voting on next time. So I'd like to call the regular meeting of the Board of Education to order up. And I would like to dispense, if that's okay, with the roll call and the Pledge of Allegiance. And there are no public comments. You were saying, I saw it, that there is that the goals were in here.
So, yep, top of this, on the back of the first page,
There it is. I did-
7A.
Thank you, sir. All right.
You're welcome.
And on to action items. Item A, approve the e-learning plan. Make a motion, please.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the e-learning plan as presented at the public hearing on September 28th, just before the regular meeting.
So,
Do we have any discussion about the e-learning plan? I would be shocked if we did. Considering you just had a moment to do it. Okay. Let's do a roll call, please.
Ms. Casson,
Yes.
Mr. Bowman,
Yes.
Mr. Gray. Yes.
I'm sorry, was that, did they call my name?
Yes.
Okay, it's a little tough to hear. Yes.
Ms. I,
Yes?
Ms. Murphy,
Yes.
Ms. Owen,
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, it passes on to item B, approval of the budget. Denise,
I'd like to make a motion to approve the fiscal year 2021 budget.
is there discussion on this? Likely not. Okay, the roll call, please, Veronica.
Mr. Coleman,
Yes.
Mr. Gray,
Yes.
Mr. Buziak,
Yes.
Ms. I,
Yes?
Ms. Mr. Murphy,
Yes.
Ms. Ory,
Yes.
Ms. Caswell Turret,
Yes. I'd like to make a motion that we approve the consent agenda, which includes the approval of the minutes as presented, the treasurer's report and approval, the bill approval and payment authorization, the activity account, personnel report. Does anybody have does anybody want to pull any of those items out for independent discussion? Okay, then I move we accept the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
Roll call, please, Melissa.
Mr. Gray,
Yes.
Mr. Gouzier,
Yes.
Ms. I,
Yes.
Mr. Murphy,
Yes.
Ms. Ory,
Yes.
Ms. Caswell Turret,
Yes.
Mr. Coleman,
Yes.
Okay. That item passes. Then on to information and discussion items with the district goals being first. So last week, we met to discuss district goals and we started with the thought exchange results that we received from the community. Thank you to all the community members who took the time to send in your feedback and thoughts. We actually ended up building our goals this year from the feedback that we received. And I just basically, we found our way. It was a challenge this year because it's hard to know in a pandemic time what our goals should be. And likely it shouldn't just be, let's make it through the year. So with that in mind, I wrote down as faithfully as I could remember and put piece together from my notes what we discussed last week, and we'll review it now as a document, and we're just going to discuss it today, and then we can discuss it the next time also, and then we'll be ready to vote on the next time, and then we'll create the evaluation tool. Okay. Can I go through this afternoon?
Yes, I will go through it, and if you have any questions, let me know. Thank you, Krista, for putting these thoughts together. We'll just get rolling. Priority 1, social emotional health of students and staff. Monitor the social emotional health of students and staff. Offer a wide variety of support options for students and staff to mitigate the adverse emotional impact of COVID-19 and the abrupt changes to our school learning environment. Superintendent will develop a plan and present to the Board of Education in November and give updates as necessary in his superintendent reports in BOE meetings. Investigate the possibility of bringing back extracurricular activities.
Just FYI, off the top, the priorities aren't in order of like hierarchy. They're just all of our priorities. So just because it's priority 1 doesn't mean that it's
Priority number 1. Got it.
So support options, were they discussed? And just looked at? And would that incur any costs?
If it incurs costs, we will come back to you. We've already started some things and have some in place that we're doing. So I think the key to a lot of these goals is to report and communicate to the board and making sure that we're on track and meeting expectations. So the whole goal process to me is communicating what's important to you. And so we get to the end of the school year and say, hey, this is not what I expected. That would be a problem. We should get to the end of the school year and say, hey, we've been working hard this year. We've accomplished this, this, and this. And we set out at the beginning of the year to do this and we did it, or we didn't, but at least we know why. And so that's what's helpful to me. So a lot of this, I think the importance this year is communicating to the board and to the community what we're doing, why we're doing it. And so everybody's as informed as possible. It's not easy, but
I think we did.
thanks to some parts, I think.
Always when I see variety of support options, I think, what could those possibly be? And I know there's been concerns over giving away some of those have been met, you know? And so I'm wondering what that might be.
Right.
What it might look
Right.
Well, this is something we discussed and maybe it needs to be clarified. I don't, you know what I
like. Yeah,
mean?
well,
Yeah.
I understand the purpose of the goal, and that's to state what's important to us.
Right.
What we pursue. A wide variety of support options.
Well, he's gonna deliver that plan to the
Yep,
board in November.
So
So that'll be fleshed out then.
that's understood.
Yeah. And with the assumption that if there are attendant costs, you will make those known as much as you can in.
Yeah, if they're outside the purview of what we're already planning and already in the budget, yes. Significant. Priority 2, student learning. I think it is important. We talk a lot about social emotional learning, and we talk a lot about getting the kids back into school or remote learning and how that's going. But we also need to focus on, we want the kids to continue to learn something, and they're learning in a variety of ways, in a variety of different skills, whether that's technology or communication via technology that might be very important in the future. But there's also that, hey, we need to teach the kids how to read and write and think as well, and we don't want to lose that focus completely either. And our teachers are doing a great job, I think, of keeping that piece going and really driving forward that, hey, we have a task here and we exist to help kids learn too. So monitor. Yeah,
They are. They're not themselves out.
yeah, they are for sure. Continuously monitor student achievement with an eye toward filling in learning gaps. Part of that process, student assessment is important. We have to know what the kids know and how to help them best. We are about halfway done with our MAP testing already with the first round of the fall, and doing that remotely. It was a new challenge this year. And the kids did, overall, I thought it was lovely. Lots of positives to that. And I could be happy to answer any questions about that. Some hiccups, of course, and challenges. It's new, and it's a lot can go wrong, and it did. But overall, it was a very good experience and many positives. So you'll get a report on that, where we're at. We also do at the first through fifth or K-5 level, we have the ELA, independent reading level assessment, that teachers have done both in person and remotely, and look at those results as well. We don't have a board report because we are still learning. That was new to us in the last couple of years with our new reading curriculum, or our ELA curriculum. So we haven't had that report, but we can certainly, if we see some trends, we will definitely share that with the board and the community. Ensure to the best of our ability equitable learning opportunities during remote learning. So provide reliable internet access to those who do not have it at home. This has been a challenge based on where people live. So if households in Wadsworth that are in the more rural are struggling to find solutions that work, regardless of the cost, solutions that work for them because it is so rural. So we're trying to help out as many people as we can, and we're trying a new device. We used a company called Kajit last year, but it's not unlimited. And now that kids are on it all day and Zooming all day, and that takes up a lot more bandwidth and data. We're running out of data on those. So we're looking at other options, and we've got one ordered, and hopefully that'll get here soon. Provide meals to those in need. Dr. John's done a great job organizing the meals program. We've got a system that's going to continue to evolve. I think it's been crazy, but trying to get meals to kids who are in school, but then going home, and the brothers and sisters, one brother or sister might be in school, one might be at home, with multiple siblings in the family, organizing all of that, and then having deliveries, and it's been a logistical nightmare, actually.
It changes every day.
It does change every day.
It's like the regular lunch count at school, it changes every day, we need to- especially the in-school portion.
Right.
Just even that in itself, if you had to deal with that, that would be enough to put you into a tizzy.
In a regular
In a
year, that would,
regular year,
yes,
and that's just the learning.
that's just a little sliver, but it's a lot. That would typically be a lot, yes. Ensure that children with disabilities, 504 plans and IPs receive their services and supports. I think Elizabeth, well, I don't think, I know Elizabeth has done a great job of supporting those children and rewriting plans and making those plans reasonable and providing all the supports that we can, both remotely and in person. We have offered for all of our students with IPs, excuse me, not all of our students with IEPs, I should correct that, but we have offered for some of our programming of students with IEPs that are the most intensive services to be done in person. So we've set up that to be done in school, which has been wonderful for those kids. Put supports in place to prevent at-risk students from slipping through the cracks. So not just 504 and IEPs, we've identified some students who haven't been participating, regardless of if they've had a 504, an IEP or not. If we see students that are kind of not attending classes online or not attending classes in school, we've reached out to them. We've done a couple of home visits already, I know, and we will continue to provide different supports for them. Especially as we see going through the year now, we're starting to pick up patterns of kids who are struggling. So we want to make sure that kids get that opportunity to learn. I added the orange ones since Carissa did it, so I just want to point that out. Provide an update to the board mid-year on all
That's a
of
pretty
this.
important piece, though.
Yeah, yeah,
Good.
yeah.
Good add.
Just wanted to clarify this. These are the deliverables to the board to say, okay, we've done this, but I need to put this on my calendar for January, February-ish to provide an update. Adequate tech support for both students and teachers for remote learning. Provide updates on tech tickets and support. So again, provide some sort of report, something to the board of how that's going and what we're doing for support. It's more than just tech tickets, although that's a lot. We're managing right now, 2 years ago, we were managing 1,500 devices. Right now, we're managing 1,900 devices. In how many households? You know, when you're talking teacher households and children's households, trying to connect from all of those locations on 1,900 devices coming into here and going back out, it's amazing that it works as well as it does, actually. And then each of those devices has hundreds of apps that need to be functioning and talking nicely with each other, and then running through PowerSchool to Schoology to Seesaw to everything. So
I'm assuming tech tickets means issues with
yeah,
devices.
device. So
that are reported.
yep, tech tickets range from I can't log on to my internet at home, or I forgot my password, which is probably the most common is I forgot my password on how to log into Schoology. And we're also working on a single sign-on with Clever, but getting every time we add a app to Clever, that's a whole different communication that we have to set up behind the scenes to make that work. So it's a lot. It is a lot. And it's insane how complicated it is. We're doing very well considering. And abide by the ISB guidelines for remote learning. Yes. Priority 3, curriculum. provide staff with learning opportunities to support them in remote learning while adding diversity to our curriculum and using the opportunities inherent in remote learning to strengthen resilience, problem solving, and soft skills. Support staff with remote learning by offering adequate professional development. Yeah, that adequate there is a loaded term. We've had a lot of professional development this year already, and we have support, but it's never enough in some cases, and it is a challenge trying to learn while we're teaching. I'm constantly learning how to do new things with technology, and that takes a lot of time.
Yeah, and I don't think the board could determine what adequate means.
Right.
I mean, that's just not that's, you know what I mean?
Yeah. I don't know if I could. I don't know if anybody could. Never enough is
Yeah.
what, or one more training. But then how do you find time for the training? And then there's so much to learn while trying to keep things rolling.
Well, teachers are spending so much time just trying to keep the train on the tracks. So I can only imagine that it's hard to also do PD, you know,
Right.
on top of it.
Investigate opportunities to make our ELA and social studies curriculum more socially responsible in both elementary and middle school. And metrics was a question. How do we measure that? Was what?
Yeah, so I was like, what is that? Yeah.
So my suggestions under that were meet with the social studies committee regularly to refine and engage in curriculum content. So we have a professional development day coming up on October 13th. And so that day can be used for that. And I have planned, the social studies committee doesn't know this at middle school yet, but I'm planning to meet with them on that day at some point once we hash out some of those details, which hopefully we'll do tomorrow in our admin meeting.
Can you maybe report on this?
Oh, yeah, and then report. Yeah.
Are there any other specific metrics anybody is interested in for this topic?
I think engaging in the community on this and board and parents in the discussion on what's important for our students to teach will be valuable as well.
This would be cool.
There's no shortage of subjects in social studies and civics out there right now. It's very, very intense, very interesting time. Soft skills. Use the unique opportunities inherent in our remote learning environment to encourage students to problem solve, negotiate, and self-advocate. Provide parents with curriculum oh, this would be another bullet. So
I don't know what a metric for that would be.
it could be just reporting back, or it could be anecdotal report back to the board on what teachers are seeing and how students are stepping up. For example, I know of one teacher in the middle school who had a student who started very shy and wasn't participating very well, and then kept encouraging that student to visit during office hours, just to develop that rapport and to get that student to come out of their shell on Zoom. Because some kids are, it's fascinating because some kids are gregarious on Zoom, but not in person. And so other kids, it's the opposite, where they are very comfortable with people, but then they get on Zoom and they don't, for whatever reason, like the video aspect of it, and withdraw. And some kids are just withdrawn or more introverted in either setting. That's just our nature. So reaching and pulling, the teacher's job is, no matter what the environment is, to pull those students into that discussion and into that learning for engagement. And I think our teachers are doing a great job at that, from what I'm seeing and hearing. So we want to continue to do that. Yeah, I don't know how to quantify that.
I mean, everybody knows I'm all about the metrics. I don't know what it is.
Not the soft skills. Really. Like you measure how well somebody connects with other people.
Especially during this time.
Maybe simply gather examples that you provided, coming out of the middle school, and just state that you're going to share those with the staff on how to engage students and maybe go into the process, and then if those stories are available, discuss that in the superintendent report.
That's a great idea. And that'll encourage parents or teachers to share their moments with you, with each other. And then, everybody can learn from each other, kids and,
Right.
communicate about what's working. It's lovely. The next thing.
Provide parents with curriculum expectations that are developed by trimester or quarter throughout the year in each major subject area. Report to the board on progress periodically. So we are working with the Regional Office of Education, and that work is going to continue on October 13th as well on what are those priority standards that we need to be hitting. I know our teams of teachers are great. They know what to teach. Our third grade teachers know what third grade needs to know and learn. But communicating that with each other, they're doing a great job with each other, but maybe there's some things where they are unsure of what's the highest priority and need to talk about that. So they need time to work with the administration to say, okay, yes, and get permission to knock some things off and focus on others and what is a priority. And we're working with the Regional Office of Education, their education consultants, to do that with us. So that's important. And then communicating that back out to parents so that everybody knows what the expectations are. And it's okay if we don't get as far as we used to get at the end of third grade. Are we going to shoot for it? Sure, but it's okay. This is we're going to be okay, and kids will catch up. We will catch them up, and we're looking at this again as a long-term situation as far as our experience. It's not, if kids miss a year of school, it doesn't mean that for the rest of their life they're never going to learn this. They just may learn it at a different time, but they will learn it, and we will catch them up. It's hard to remember when we're in it, but we've had similar situations before with the individual students. They will catch up given the support and time.
No, we had that. Remember, we had that very underperforming class at that one time.
We did have an
they
underperforming
did
class
catch
once.
up.
They did catch up. They did catch up.
We were very worried about them. for several years,
Right.
and then they caught up.
And there's students every year that have illnesses that for whatever reason are missing a significant amount of school. They catch up again. They might be struggle for a little bit and with their peers, but they catch up. At least here, you've got a whole group of peers who are struggling to catch up with you, so no one feels like they're left too far behind, which is helpful. And of course, safety. Students and staff, state and local government guidelines when making decisions about remote versus in-person learning, abide by all state and local health protocols during in-person learning, communicate and execute a coherent and effective student check-in process. We're working on refining that. That's been a huge disappointment to me, by the way, with the technology company that we hired at the beginning of August, end of July, beginning of August. End of July, we hired them, and they promised that we could have that up and running by August 18th,
Really.
which was our first day that we were anticipating students. It was something like that.
It was more toward the end of August, but it was close enough to our start.
It was- Yes, before kids were coming back into the
Right.
building.
We're
So
right
we were,
about the time.
right, we would have had opportunities to trial it and use it. It didn't work, so. Very unfortunate, and promises that were not upheld. So we are still in a passive mode, and we're still taking temperatures of every kid as they come into the building, which is great. And that process is going better than I thought, so we may continue that and go with a different system.
I thought it was pretty, I was pretty impressed this morning, I gotta say.
Yeah, it works pretty well. Yeah. And no matter what we do, no system is going to be perfect, of course, but we want to make it the best that we can. Communicate clear protocols on social distancing and mask wearing. I think that is going very, very well. We're still teaching kids. 4th and 5th grade came in this morning, and they looked as bewildered as anybody I've ever seen, because they remember how school is. I think the little kids, kindergarten, 1st, 2nd grade, they're just, no matter where they are, can't remember last week. But 4th and 5th grade remember what school was. So when they come in and they're dropped off in the front, they're totally disoriented. It's really fun to watch, but they got it. They'll get it down, and they'll get that social distancing in our entry system, and it's working very well. Coming off the bus, we're able to keep them.
There's a lot of planning that went into that. to
There's a
make it
lot of
go
planning.
So well. I drove up today, I thought it's always been this way right now, you know? I felt that way, like, yeah. Oh goodness.
Give it a couple more weeks. But yeah, the principals, assistant principals have done a great job of thinking through every little detail, from where to put the stickers in the hallways to where to put the marks on the sidewalk outside, to how that's going to work. And every day, this is why we started slowly and in phases, because we got to practice with kindergarten with just a small group of kids for 3 days, and we changed it every day, because if we would have started with the masses, it would have been much more troublesome and chaotic. So it worked out well to add, and then you can anticipate what's going to happen, bring kids in safely. They're not, the kids are, there's enough adults to corral the kids and guide them. It's working out better than I expected. Communicate and execute clear protocols on cleaning of buses and classrooms. Dr. Johns is trained on buses and put out information on classroom protocols, and this is how it's cleaned. This is what gets cleaned. This is what you use when. Use the Virex when it's on certain surfaces and high touch areas. And after there's been a suspected case, you don't use that every day. And there's some that use every day. There's some that you leave on sit wet for 10 minutes. There's some disinfectant that's 4 minutes, some that are 1 minute. So, and you use those at different. Yep.
Excuse me, Jason,
Yes, sir.
what are the classroom cleaning protocols right now?
I can send them to you. I don't have them.
I guess maybe that's probably a big question to answer. What are the classrooms cleaned after what each day?
Oh, good question. Yeah, they're cleaned every day, but there's different levels depending on if we've. So the high touch areas are cleaned every day with disinfectant.
Right.
Then do we use the fogger once a week?
I believe so, but I'm gonna check and make sure I think that was the intent when we purchased them.
Right.
Because if you use them every day, then it gets sticky. It adheres. Basically, the electrostatic sprayers.
That's what I
adhere
meant.
to the surface,
Couldn't think of the word.
and you don't want day after day to have that piling up on the surface. You want to have a chance for it to be wiped off.
Right. So there's different tools on different days, but the classrooms are cleaned every day. Bathrooms are cleaned every day. They're not cleaned multiple times a day.
Right. So this cleaning takes place after the kids have been dismissed from the classrooms.
Correct.
And
Okay.
some of it takes place during the day too, as far as handrails and doorknobs and those kind of
Yes.
things that the custodians are rotating through the building. You know, they're hitting some of those high touch areas as they walk through the building.
Okay. The main question that I had was having to do whether the kids were in the building or not, and potential with aerosols.
Got it.
So that's where that was coming from. So okay, so there's no classroom cleaning taking place, is what it sounds like, when the kids are in a classroom.
No.
Okay.
Nope.
All right. That was the real question. So okay, thank you.
And if we have to, so last week we had to remove students from a classroom 3 different times, 3 different classrooms for deep cleaning, where we had to use the electrostatic sprayer to disinfect the room and wipe down all the surfaces. Because if one student is sent home with one symptom, so if a student complains of a stomach ache and they go to the nurse and the nurse determines that it's not due to hunger or overeating or something else, that it could be COVID, then that student is sent home, and that classroom, then all the students come out of that classroom, and then that classroom gets cleaned. But even that is after the students are gone, because we let that sit. Let all the aerosolized particles drop. The latest study is that the aerosols of COVID can remain hanging in the air for up to 3 hours. So ideally, we'd like to let that classroom sit for 3 hours, let everything fall to the surfaces, and then clean it off.
Okay. The point of my question was the aerosols from the cleaning agents. But
Yeah, right. Yep.
Dan, okay, good. All right, thank you.
Bet. Okay, execute clear communication protocols to our community and continuously monitor changes in parameters and protocols from Lake County Health Department, ISB, and Department of Public Health, and abide by them. We do continually monitor. We got a new toolkit from the county today, so I haven't had a chance to look over it super closely. There weren't huge changes. We already know about most of them. It's just more helpful. Here's what you communicate to parents, more clarification on what happens when, et cetera, et cetera. So that's been good. I meet with the health department with all of the superintendents in Lake County every Wednesday morning. And then a small group of us that have more students in school meet with the health department on Friday morning every week, just to go through. It helps us talk through what each school district is doing and how we're staying safe. There's about 4 or 5 superintendents on Friday who meet with the health department. So
How many schools in Lake County are having in-person option?
To the degree that we are, Zion Elementary has in-person. Highland Park has in-person. Highland Park is the only one. They're on a and B, so they split their kids in half. The ones that want to come, and there's a morning and afternoon, so they're in a morning afternoon. 50% of the kids. More comparable to our situation and how we're doing it would be Grass Lake and Oak Grove in Libertyville, Rondout, which is in Libertyville, and Lake Bluff. So those are the people that I communicate with most frequently about what we're doing. Grass Lake and Rondout have less than 200 students in each of their schools total to start with. So they're dealing with K8 is in Rondout is probably 120 kids in the building. Grass Lake's 150 maybe 140. So a little different situation there. Oak Grove is one school K through 8. So they're a little more comparable. They have 900-ish students in their district. And same with like Lake Bluff's about the same. They have 2 schools, so they're more like us. And they're doing similar situations. We are blessed with more space, so we're able to adhere to the protocols even better than some of those school districts, but they're doing different things that's more intense. So I think it's good. Overall, it's been very successful with all of those school districts. No spreading is happening at school at this point, which is good, between either staff or students. What's happening is that any COVID cases and spread is being linked to parties outside of school and get-togethers. I know in one of those school districts that I mentioned, there was a big sleepover one weekend, and one of the kids had COVID, and of course that spread to a few other people. So lots of kids ended up getting quarantined there, and I'm not saying it's okay. It wasn't Lindenhurst, but even small gatherings, that's how it can spread. So it's good to be careful, and it's okay to gather too if people are safe. It's just a matter of the 3 W's. Practice the 3 W's. We know no matter what the contagion is, whether it's strep throat or rotavirus or coronavirus or anything that can be spread by close contact, you wash your hands and you wear a mask and stay away, and it's safer. So the more we do that, the less we'll get sick.
I wonder if we can, as an added section, what would you guys think about adding a finance portion and then just periodic updates on the budget or budget changes? So that would be, what do you guys think of that?
I think it's important. I do think Dr. Johns does that right now. Business office reports.
Yeah, I think it's good to put it in there just so that
Oops.
that we're communicating to everyone that, this is a communication document, not just to Dr. Lind, it's a communication document to the public that we tend to assume that, everyone understands that we're going to want to stay on top of the financial picture, but I think especially this is a very different year. So many things changing. It's a good idea to put it out that we would be communicating on the financial impact of various changes throughout the year.
Good.
So what thoughts from everyone? What do you all think? Does it sound like what we discussed?
A little more polished than what we discussed, right?
Anybody have anything to add or ask?
Yeah, I think while it recognizes the impact of COVID-19, it also causes us to focus on those post-COVID-19. So I think it's good.
Yeah, it's hard because we have to have our foot in today and getting kids in and out of school today.
Yeah.
And teachers teaching, and they're working hard on what they have to present and keep their kids going today. And we kind of have to have one foot in the future to say, this is going to be over someday. How are we preparing ourselves and our kids for the post-COVID environment, whenever that is and whatever that looks like.
And it may not be over for a while, so we've got to learn how to still set goals.
Right.
And make our, keep our academics going and keep, we can't just take a year off, we can't, we gotta keep going and just adapt constantly. Like
Right.
everybody else is, okay. And we can come up with a superintendent evaluation tool. If someone would like to take a stab at that, who's not me, they are certainly invited to. Otherwise, I will, once we discuss it, well, I think I could actually, we could actually do that. We could start on that now. It seems like we're all in pretty good. I loved the addition of doing a thought exchange for setting our district goals. At first I thought, oh boy, I don't think they realize, like, maybe we weren't clear enough on what the district goals are. And then I realized once you looked at all the different comments, it is exactly what we need to be focusing on. And I feel like we were able to use that to come up with, what the goals should be. So I love that. That was a great idea.
Yeah, I wish I would have thought of it a couple days earlier, but
No, you did great. It was great. It was great. So I think if anyone is interested in working on that superintendent evaluation tool, just shoot me an email. Otherwise, I'll probably, start knocking that out so that we can maybe look at it next week, because we're already, obviously, we're behind on the goal setting process. We usually do that in August, but we were still trying to get our bearings at that point. So, and it became clear we're always going to be getting our bearings. Okay. So thank you so much. Future agenda items include press policy updates, review of self-governance goals, review of board agreements, board calendar, staff diversity report, responsible bidder ordinance. Does anybody have anything to add that they'd like to bring up as an agenda item for the next meeting or an upcoming meeting right now? Okay. On to the superintendent report.
great. Well, today we seems like every day we get something new thrown at us that we have to jump over, a hurdle to overcome that's in any other year would cause issues. And this year it's like, okay, here we go. Let's deal with it. So today we walked into third grade had a issue in one of the classrooms with the air conditioner. It ended up being a drain that was plugged that backed up, and so all the condensation and water that gathers ran all over the floor, so it flooded that classroom and the classroom below it. So more so the classroom below it, because it ran on all of her books that she had on the back of the table, and it was leaking in different spots because as it comes across the floor, of course, it drips wherever it can find a hole, and it gets on the beams and runs and drops in random spots. So it was a mess this morning. So 2 classrooms had to move this morning, which we're getting pretty good at moving classrooms. One of them was the one that moved last week. So she's like, oh, so we can't win. So there's that. That was today. And then this afternoon was a power outage, and it took another hour and a half to get the internet back up after the power outage. So there's disruption again. And what else happened? I don't know what else happened. There was one thing after the other. Last week I wrote this in my board notes, a funeral procession, which was really pretty and grand, and you know, majestic in some ways and sad in others, but it was right at dismissal time, so we kind of had to alter our plans, and that caused a little bit of a scurry around here to make sure that that worked. And the week before that was construction out here during dismissal, when they blocked off both of our one of the entrances to the building right at dismissal time
Did
again.
not communicate that with you in advance?
Well, they can't, no, I mean, we know that it's happening, it's just the time, it just happens to be
Well, they
at
probably
that
didn't
time.
think noon would be a tough time.
When,
Yeah.
when you're taking a big, whatever, asphalt machine down the road, it's pretty tough to predict when you start a half a mile that way where you're gonna be at lunch sometimes, so.
Well, it's hard to predict the school's
it's
gonna
hard.
dismiss it. once.
Right, yeah. It took a long time to explain that to them too, but that's okay. So it's just one thing after another, and our teachers are great. They're just, okay, we'll roll with it. Here we go. Oh, and get off after it. So classrooms should be okay. Hopefully they'll be up and running tomorrow, at least get the kids back in them. And we'll still continue to dry out the ceiling tiles in the one room. We want to make sure they're dry. Yeah, no. It's just wet, just water, which can cause a lot of damage, but I think we caught it quick enough that won't be too bad. Also, the map testing, 4, 5, and 6 were done last week with reading and math, so those groups are done. There's far less makeups this year because we did it remotely. The neat thing about doing it remotely, there's lots of negatives, so I don't want to dismiss the negative pieces, but some kids really liked it and teachers liked it because when a child's done, they're home. They don't have to sit in the classroom and watch everybody else. They can do what they need to do. And there's, in some cases, less distraction at home for kids because they're focused on their computer. They don't have to worry about who's finishing and when they're finishing. And that was my daughter's take on it. She said, oh yeah, it was great. There's no pressure on me this time because I wasn't worried about my friends finishing and me wondering if I should be done already or if I shouldn't be done already or whatever. I just did it and I wasn't as distracted as I thought I would be in my room. I thought I would be more distracted and I wasn't. And so it worked. That's one case, but worked pretty well for them. Yeah, I think a lot of kids did, and we took our time. It took a lot of time, but it worked to some degree. We'll see what the results are. Hopefully, 2 parents didn't help their kids because that doesn't help, which does happen. And I know it's just hard not to help your kids when they're asking you a question, but I don't think we'll see a lot of that. The younger kids, the remote is really challenging though. Ooh, is it challenging to do that with first graders? Tests they've never seen or maybe seen once before and have connectivity issues. It's just brutal, but that's why we waited till they came back in for most of them. If we have to bring some kids in to finish up, we'll do that. But that's going. 1st through 3rd is doing it. Will be done after this week, and then first through 3rd, and then 7th grade is also testing this week too. So we'll get 7th grade done, and then next week 8th grade, and the district should be done except for a few makeups. That's about all I can muster at this point. It's going fairly well. Board reports.
Awesome.
I'll jump back in on board reports because I have some good announcements. Some fun.
All right, business office report, it's all documented. Yeah, there was something that I want to ask you. So maybe we'll go through that. That's okay with you.
I don't have it.
It's attached to the agenda.
Oh, good.
The one on the property tax collection, it's gonna be probably till the next meeting before I have an idea if that's a true impact, because last year we got a payment on the 26th, one on the 12th and one on the 26th. This time we got one on the 17th, but we haven't gotten another payment yet. I'm not exactly sure how the county each year determines when they're gonna distribute, so we're showing less percentage received at, on today, as of today, than we did the 26th of September a year ago. But that doesn't necessarily mean that we're not gonna get it in October.
Yeah, it's just timing.
We'll know once we get to know, if we get through October and we're still like at 80-some% that we did have a delay because of the fact that I think the next payment on the 4-payment plan is due on November 9th. So that may be the one that, gives us a little bit of a hiccup. But we don't know yet until we get there. The intergovernmental agreement for the CARES Act is something that we'll actually have. I hope to get it on the agenda for tonight, and somehow we miscommunicated. So we'll have to do a special meeting next week, which is October 12th. I have to have that to the county by October 15th. So I'll need Carissa, and then I'll have to get Jim to sign it as well, in order to get that to them. Once we get the signatures, I can just email it. So we'll get that to the county, and then that's where they're saying that they anticipate that the allocation is going to be increased. At the time originally was $35,454 was for a $4 million allocation countywide for school districts. I guess that's now 5 million and possibly will increase to 7. So that's how I came up with the $50,000 to $60,000 amount. And I believe in the budget I put 50,000. On the pneumatic system, the oldest sections of the building are still using the pneumatic controls, which means there's a compressor that sits there and runs like 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, pumping this air through these little tubes to control the heating and air conditioning in those older sections. We did have a price originally to replace that with the electronic controls, and it was about $60,000. But I realized once I saw that they were missing, like my office, that's also in the pneumatic system for the heat, but not the air conditioning. So they came back this week. No, they came back last week. I got to think what today was. They came back last week and they rechecked, and then they added the spaces that have been left off that original information. Then I'm going to be working with both the gas and possibly the electric utility company to look at what kind of cost savings we would see. And then there would be, it's a little different than it used to be when it was through PCEO. Now you go directly through the utility company, so they would have to tell us what kind of incentive they would give us for making that change, but you have to jump through all the hoops with them in order to get their dollars. We did the same thing with the water heater that we installed summer before last. So it's quite a few hoops to jump through, but if we get anything, it's worth it.
As I recall, the water heater is that paid off, didn't it?
It wasn't a huge dollar amount, but it still was. It was $1,000 or $1,500. It was enough to make it worthwhile. So the piece that probably was the most cost effective was insulating. We not only have the hot water heater, but then in like the old section here and at the middle school, we had a separate hot water holding tank that wasn't insulated. So we added insulation and we got back probably 75% of the cost of the insulation. So that was definitely worthwhile. So I don't know exactly what that cost is going to be. Like I said before, it was 60,000, so it will be more because there's some additional controls and things that we need to add. So I'll kind of keep you updated as I get more information on that. Now, the next piece is we had, it actually was 2 property owners, but it's 3 parcels of property. And these are,
They're the gas stations at Wadsworth and
they're
41.
both gas stations. And initially we had one a couple of years ago that was the strip mall by Walgreens. And I went there and looked at it, and like 3/4 of the storefronts were empty. And I'm talking to the attorney, when they don't have those things rented, then it does reduce the value of the property. So I drove out there expecting to see like a strip mall that was half empty. And instead I saw businesses that operated throughout the pandemic. Now granted, I know the price of gas went down, so the profits probably went down, but nothing that would justify a reduction of this magnitude in their assessed value. So if they go to the Lake County appeal process, then we would still get the tax dollars because it would just shift to other property owners. But if they decide to appeal it to a PTAB appeal, then that's something that often takes several years to go through. And then at some point in time, for each year that they go back and say, oh, well, you shouldn't have been charged that, then we would lose about 18,000 to 20,000 a year for just those 3 parcels. So we felt like it was better, and it's cheaper to have the attorney involved now than it would be for a PTAB hearing. So we're hoping that by just having our appearance and attending the hearing, that we'll come up to some resolution that's not going to be quite this drastic a drop in assessed value, because that does impact all the other property owners within our school district if they actually do these reductions. And it's just such a huge reduction. Not as bad as the one home that we had a few years ago that was probably at the time a $400,000 home that they were saying that the value of the property was $0
Right.
because they wanted a tax break. I don't know why, but it's just part of the game that, instead of putting a realistic number down. So I went there expecting maybe to see an empty lot, and there was this beautiful home.
Did they remove the toilets?
I don't know. They weren't in the front yard.
It was precedent.
They weren't in the front yard.
Are they allowed, they're just allowed to take their time at home? I mean, I'm
They
shocked by
filed the
this.
paperwork. And this was somebody that was using an attorney, and as I remember it correctly, I don't even think that they showed up for the hearing.
Oh,
But it's still one of those, it's intriguing to look and see how people do that. And other people, it's only if it's more than $100,000 that it triggers them notified. But it's a smaller amount, like, let's say you had a reassess, and new appraisal done on your house because you're gonna refinance or something. Or then you can use that appraisal to have your property taxes reduced. But you're not gonna do more than 100,000. So the 100,000 is kind of the trigger for them to notify the school district.
I mean, I can understand wanting to have your property reevaluated, or I can understand that, but, yeah,
Sometimes what people put down in the form doesn't make sense.
I just think
But yeah.
that's super interesting that that's allowed.
But this over $500,000, and now that assessed value is the real AV, the real value of the property. So the part that we would tax would be basically look at a third of that. So a little under 200,000. But that's still significant. Considering that it's a 62% reduction. Because the total value is like 999,000.
How could you even
or something.
justify a 62% reduction if you've been in business the whole time?
I don't know either. And I don't think that the value of the property is, now each of them did have a restaurant in it, and I could understand that. But even then, the lack of business doesn't change. Well, it could change the value of the building. But the gas station part, there's not a justification as to, I can't imagine that it's worth less money now than it was before. unless they're claiming that it wasn't assessed properly before.
That brings up an interesting question. I mean, if you've lost business due to COVID, is your business inherently to the county would,
Yeah, our
less,
attorney is
you know what I
saying
mean?
no, but.
Yeah.
Now, where we would get into something, and that's where I probably would reach out to the high school district as well, is if they would file for a PTAB hearing, then you go through the process of getting an appraisal, et cetera, if you want to fight it.
What does
And so that's a lot of
PTAB
times
stand?
where, the school districts or the units of government might band together to question it. What are you asking about?
What does PTAB stand?
Property tax, business tax.
Yeah, that probably is close, probably property tax assessment board, but basically, I
So
think
it's just
that
an
takes it to
appeal,
the-
basically.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
it takes it to the level above that.
Oh, okay.
So it's like they're appealing above, outside of Lake County, maybe to the state. I don't know.
Is this a situation where they're putting this big number out there, hoping that we'll settle at half of that or something?
I can tell you that when I was in districts where we typically fought those, we ended up settling for about half in most cases.
Oh, okay.
We
So
would
they're
have
gonna
our
shoot for
attorney,
the
we would have
moon
the
and then-
attorney go and represent us. A lot of that was when I was working on the south side of Chicago, and usually we would combine with the high school district and we would help, we would split the cost of the attorney to do that. But we had a lot more of these cases filed in that area than what we, here. This is probably the only one that I've questioned since I've been here. The others, well, that one in the house that went down to zero. But, typically, we don't see people here making, I haven't seen people here making those kinds of, grand gestures.
Mhm.
And then the last piece is just on the phone system that I think we were all set to replace it, and then all of a sudden the cost went from like 80,000 to 140 or something like that. I don't remember the exact numbers, but it was more money than we had available.
That was shady.
So we are ready to start looking at that. So I just want to give you a heads up that we're going to be looking at it, but it's going to be in between all the COVID stuff that we're doing as well. But we did have a scare the other day. And it ended up, I think, the phone lines, but lots of crackling and those kind of things. And, we'll have alarms that go off because the system is so old. We can't get any kind of service contract on the equipment because it is so old. So that I know Ernest came to me and told me that alarm was going off. And he came back and said, no, that's okay, because it's not an alarm we have to worry about, but we don't have anybody who'll come out and do it. And it's also very difficult to find. Well, we do have somebody who will come on time and material basis, but it's also one of those that the system is so old that we have to get used or refurbished parts to be able to even repair it. And each time we have a part that we need to replace, it's harder and harder to find that. And then the cost of those parts is higher and higher every time we replace it. So it's one of those that, before we get through this school year, it would be wonderful if we could find a way to replace that, whether it be at winter break or spring break or sometime when we have some time. We don't have kids and people in the building. And I know I've been told they can do it in the weekend, but that makes me really nervous. I'd much rather have a week or so to make sure it works.
Yep.
Thank you. On to board reports.
Oh,
Oh, wait, was there more?
property tax appeal board, so that's it.
Oh, okay. Oh, that makes
I
sense.
just Googled it, so.
It's not that hard. Yeah, okay.
But the
That
first
makes
one came up was patent trial on appeal board.
All right. Board reports.
I've got one.
Go for it.
All right, I've got two. One is recognizing Stephen. Yeah, you get a certificate of recognition from IASB. for attending the Illinois Association of School Boards Delegate Assembly, for serving as your district's delegate, and for helping to formulate policies for which this association is governed. So congratulations.
Thank you, sir.
You are so very welcome. I think that's been on my desk for 6 months or more, right around COVID-ish time.
No, yeah.
And then Carissa is being honored because she has achieved Master School Board member status with the Illinois Association of School Boards. So congratulations to Carissa. Getting a certificate and a frame, and Carissa also gets another plaque for being a Leadership Academy Fellow. So that's another plaque to add to that recognition. So congratulations. So what that signifies, just because we want people to know the commitment that our school board has, and Carissa, as a leader of the school board, has exemplified and followed, is the continuing education of how to, of being part of the Illinois Association of School Boards, and also learning about school board governance. So in order to earn points, you have to earn, I believe it is 200 points to be a master board member. In order to earn those points, you do that by attending the joint annual conference, being a delegate assembly, division meetings, division governing meetings, serving as a division officer, alliance lead, going to a leadership summit, joint annual conference panel review, or resolution committee. Also by attending, I just said that, and by doing the training. So there's an academy, Leadership Academy, about Open Meetings Act, is you get points for the Open Meetings Act, which everybody has to do. There's another school board meeting when you're first school board member. There's another meeting you have to go to, 3 meetings. There's 3 classes that you have to attend, so you get points for those 3 classes. But then beyond that, there's additional points to be earned. So thank you for your commitment to continuing education. Appreciate it.
I loved learning about board governance through the IASB. I feel like it's really enriched our district's experience. I know that when we first were getting it all back together, we were first
Long time ago.
back when, because I have tales from previous board members, Diane and Jane, and heard the tales of Bob Redding and his commitment to making sure we followed governance basics. So I feel like the ISB has been a good partner with us in improving our governance and oversight capabilities, and it's incredible the amount of information they share with us. And I'm grateful that the school supports our learning. I think it's very very much consistent with our mission. So thank you.
Thank you.
I want to say again, kudos to Ben and the staff for making that drop-off process so good. Lillian was, I can't even tell you, my daughter was like over the moon to be going back to school today. So I'm so grateful for everyone's, all the effort everyone has put into getting these kids back to school. I like to cry right now because it's making such a difference. And I'm not even just talking about, my kid, I'm talking about people will come up to me on the street or I will be talking to them on the street and they'll say, I'm so grateful my child's able to go back to school because, that's, they have trouble learning remotely and whatnot. So I know it has not been easy, and I know I'm super grateful to everyone who's put in the incredible amount of work that you guys have put in. Anybody else? Anyone out in Zoom land? Okay. Then there being no further business, I'd like to move that I'd like to move that we adjourn. Favor? Opposed? Okay, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank
Thank
you.
you. Good night.
Good night.
Everybody. So I just-